Thank you for joining us. I'm David Wagner, President-elect, filling in for President Paul today, who I think is enjoying a great St. Patrick's Day on vacation, perhaps. Happy St. Patrick's Day to especially our Irish members and guests and all others who are celebrating today. Just this morning, I was talking with my wife and we were reflecting on our trip to Ireland, I think back in the fall of 2017, almost got in the wrong century here, and the wonderful time we had there. What a wonderful time we had. Our memories, especially, so many different memories, but our memories of a time in a country pub outside of Dublin, being entertained by a small group of local folks playing their accordions and singing Irish songs and encouraging us to dance along with them, still lives strong within us. So a happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you. I trust all of you also have taken the opportunity to enjoy some of the beautiful weather we've had this past week. I know I still am enjoying that weather compared to what, 4 weeks ago or whatever it was. This is beautiful weather. This is beautiful Oklahoma spring weather. Well, we have truly an interesting speaker for today's meeting. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our Rotarian of the day, Past President Matt Davis, who will introduce our speaker to us. Past President Matt.
Thanks, David. St. Patrick's is always an important day for us because my son Matthew was born in Boston on St. Patrick's Day, and the nurses would not speak to me once they realized I was naming him Matthew II rather than Sean or Patrick. So I am delighted to introduce our speaker today. As always, any questions you have, if you'll just send them through the chat part of Zoom, I will ask our speaker during the Q&A when we're finished. My first introduction to his company and his family was working on the board of the Tulsa Historical Society with his incredible sister, Donna Dutton. It was soon obvious to me that the commitment that the McElroy family has to giving back to the Tulsa community. The more I read about their company's worldwide leading position in their industry, it became obvious why our Rotary Club members had requested this program. Our speaker became president of McElroy in 1988 and has led it through its greatest period of economic growth. I am delighted to introduce Chip McElroy.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And Matt, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm truly humbled and I'm honored to be asked to speak to your group this afternoon. So with that said, I am going to pull up my PowerPoint here, and I'm going to put it in presentation mode, and hopefully that comes through. So as I was preparing for my remarks, I was actually going out to get some screen grabs of your logo, and this picture came up. And obviously the story I took away from it is of all of the community outreach that Rotary International is known for. I've known for a long, long time about clean drinking water, something we take for granted in this country. And as you'll see in my conversation with all of you today, it's a pretty big deal for us as a business and the larger industry that we represent. So I just thank you for being able to have me here today. A little bit about McElroy's history. We were founded in 1954 by my parents, Art and Panny McElroy. You know, Dad's story is a typical American dream story. He was an only child. His father was a self-employed journeyman plumber. As a result, Dad grew up helping his dad out, basically plumbing businesses and homes throughout the Tulsa area. Dad always told the story that when he was about 12 or 13 years old, he had one too many toilet traps dumped on him when working under a house. And he was heard to say, you know, I'll be damned if I'm going to be a plumber when I grow up. So as any psychologist will tell you, it's very important to not wish something too hard or too long because it ensures it's going to happen. Anyway, Dad was the first of his family to go off to university, Oklahoma State, A&M at the time, studying mechanical engineering. World War II cut that short between his junior and senior year. he wound up going to work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And they knew of his engineering background, but they also knew of his background working as an apprentice plumber. And that really launched him, I would say, into the realm that he wound up spending the rest of his life. He got involved in designing the basic infrastructure for bases and base housing for various branches of the military early on in the war. Wound up enlisting in the United States Navy. He credits the Navy with more gifts in leadership and relationship with people than he could have gotten anywhere else. He comes back to Tulsa after the war, winds up going to work for a family business here named Joseph A. Coy and Company. It still exists today under the name Yuba. I would argue it probably exists today under the name Yuba because of my dad. But Joe Coy took dad and mom aside in the early 1950s and basically said, look, we've got a family business. I can't give you any of it. I can't sell you any of it. But Art, you're not going to be happy working for me the rest of your life. And I really would encourage you and Penny to go start your own deal. And so with that encouragement, mom and dad literally started this business in their garage in the spring of 1954. You know, when I look back on both of my parents, they both had this incredible discipline as a human being, this incredible work ethic, not unlike so many of the children of the Depression. But dad brought to the table truly an engineer's mind and an inventor's heart. My mom brought to the table those same passions around work ethic and discipline and relationships, and she had a penchant for the numbers. And so from the founding of this business up until really my dad's death in 1988, it really was this incredible marriage and incredible business partnership of both Art and Penny McElroy that built the foundation of the business that we know and love today. So back to a minute of dad's penchant for relationships, engineering, and invention. All of these people that he connected with from his Navy days to when he came back to the United States, went to work for Coy and Company. Number one, people really gravitated toward my dad because of the genuine nature in which he lived with them in a relationship. But more importantly, as related to the business, they understood his mind, they understood his restlessness in terms of finding better ways. And so it was in the mid-1960s that one of those old customers from his previous employer came back and asked him if he could build them a machine to put fins on tubes because this air-cooled heat exchanger market was going to be a big deal. And so the picture on the right of your screen is basically my dad posing in front of one of our early model number 3 machines, a machine that first debuted in about 1967. And I'm pleased to say that that FinTube product line is not only the product line that built this company from the late 60s onward through the 70s, but it's still a very viable product line for who McElroy is today. And the irony of it, Dad's still plumbing. So if we fast forward to 1969, again, some of these relationships from his heat exchanger days came back to him and said, Art, there's this new kind of polyethylene pipe. We call it high density. As you know, Art, medium density polyethylene has been around since the late 1950s. Few people probably realize it or not, but polyethylene pipe was actually invented here in Tulsa by the DuPont company under a brand name called Aldil. And up until the late 90s, they actually had a plant still here in Tulsa making pipe. But that was a first generation polyethylene, and these engineers from Phillips were working on the next generation pipe that was not only stronger, but also tougher. And they had this one distinct problem. While pipe had been fused in the greater world for 10 or 15 years, the equipment that was made in the day would not work. And they had been to those manufacturers, and those manufacturers had told them, look, our machines work fine. Obviously something's wrong with your pipe. Dad looked at it and he said, well, I've got a few ideas. And Phillips said, no, Art, we just want you to build the machine. So he did. When he brought the machine to the forefront, demonstrated it for him, they ran off with it for a couple of weeks. They came back and they said, you know, Art, it occurs to us that we know something about making great pipe. And it's obvious from what you built us, but more importantly, what you told us you would do differently next time, that you probably know some great things about making super equipment. So why don't you go make the equipment and we'll make the pipe and we'll see where this market goes. So basically in 1969, those two R&D engineers basically opened the door to this world that McElroy lives in today, and McElroy has a reputation on a global basis today as a result of that chance encounter. But again, it was the synergy between his ability to have relationships, great relationships with people, his engineering mind, and his inventor's heart. So Dad passed away in 1988. As Matt indicated in the entry, the company today is basically owned three ways between myself and my two, I describe them as my younger sisters. We are fourth generation Tulsans. We are the second generation leading McElroy. My middle sister, Donna, and my middle sister, Peggy Tanner, she does basically business development work for us, primarily working in India, the former republics of the Soviet Union, and as we like to sometimes refer to them, the Ikistans. Donna, as many of you know, is kind of the yin to my yang. She is our executive vice president over finance and the treasury. And she and I kind of perform the duo of myself on the business development and product development and go-to-market front, and her making sure that we stay between the lines when it comes to finances. And I'm pleased to say that between Sharon and I with three kids, and Donna and David with two daughters, we already have some of the third generation sniffing around. And you know, I'm satisfied that my dad, who passed away in '88, you know, the love and passion that he and mom had for this business certainly cemented the passion and the energy that Donna, Peggy, and I had for coming into the business. But I would say more importantly, they were truly incredible parents and business partners in the way in which they help the first generation transition to the second generation. Our mom stayed on about 8 years after Dad passed away and then retired. And I look back, she too was gone all too soon, but she still had almost 10 years to look and see how the three of us moved the company forward once she retired. So this gets us to kind of present day. We are best known for the machines that we make that weld together thermoplastic pipe. Thermoplastic is a fancy way of saying that this is plastic that melts before it burns. Everything from the water bottles that you drink out of to the gas that delivers natural gas to your, or to the pipe that delivers the natural gas to your home or business is made possible by plastic pipes that are hopefully welded together by our equipment. I open my comments talking about the importance of clean water. When we look at the advantages of what a thermoplastic piping system can offer a municipality, an energy company, an exploration and production business, a mine, an industrial facility, we realize that we've got a superior solution, not just in our machine, but basically how our machine, the pipe, the fittings, and the methods of construction come together to deliver truly a leak-free, ecologically superior system. And it's why today we say that whether it's underground, in the building, or around the world, we stand for making the world a better place through better infrastructure. And we know we do that one project at a time. Before I move off of this slide, the early days, again, we got into this business in about 1969. And by 1973, we had built a range of equipment that you see here on this slide that basically went as small as half-inch tube size and as big as 48 inches in diameter. There wasn't a company at the time in the world that had such a range of equipment, and there certainly wasn't a company in the world at that time, and I would argue today, that has as much focus on the operator experience, the safety and the productivity on the job site, and the ability to offer an installation that is superior to everything else that is out there. And so that kind of brings me to the present. I didn't figure I could have this conversation today without talking about how 2020 affected McElroy. And we had a joke around here a year ago. Everybody is more familiar with the CDC than they would like to, and we decided and we decided at the time that the CDC was for us a little bit on steroids, and so we called it the C squared, D squared, C squared, as only an engineer like myself would come up with. You know, at the very least, we as an organization, as an enterprise, navigated at least 2 black swan events last year, COVID being the first one. You can argue about the second one being an outgrowth of COVID, but it was already headed that way. And that was basically what happened in the energy sector, which is probably the single largest sector a lot of our equipment is sold into. But we had 3 very distinct phases to our year. The first C squared was basically clarity and confidence. We came into 2020 expecting a down year based on what we saw happening in the energy space. And I met with basically not only our executive team, but our next level leaders late February, early March, and kind of talked about how we saw the year shaping up. Within 2 very short weeks, we realized we were dealing with the D squared, which was disorder and destruction. And honestly, in my 36 years in this business, I can't ever remember a time that there has been more chaos, more just outright fear and outright destruction of wealth, of business, of opportunity than what we went through a year ago at this time. And so as not to play the victim, as soon as we could kind of see our way through where the order book was going to land, we realized that we needed to kind of man up, not play the victim, and look at how we were going to confront the reality and create within that reality to build a brighter future, not only for ourselves, but for our employees and for our customers. And at the end of the day, I'm proud to say that we as an organization, our people here achieved extraordinary things in 2020. So where are we with the current reality? You know, I'm proud to say that from the first shutdowns that were required or mandated in April last year, we're considered an essential business because we supply people who work on infrastructure. And I'm proud to say that basically our operations were never interrupted in all of 2020. I'm also proud to say how our company and our employee base dealt with social distancing, masking, and all the other inconveniences that came along last year, because we kept some major projects moving forward even with those points of adversity. We preserved our workforce thanks to the PPP facilities that the government was kind enough to push through. You know, our order book collapsed as nothing we've ever seen collapsed pretty much all the way through the early part of May. We can look back now and see that the recovery from that low point began sometime early in the fourth quarter. But more importantly, we can see that the recovery is strengthening today. And, you know, somebody a long time ago told me that volume is vanity and profit is sanity. And I think one of the greatest accomplishments for the year, not including the PPP money, was that from a financial performance, we not only preserved jobs, we kept serving our customer, and we still delivered one of the most exceptionally strong bottom lines for having our top line shrink by over 30%. And the thing that really gets me juiced up now is that we launched probably our newest product offering that we have done in over 8 years in October. And it's already fueling a lot of the demand and energy for what our business is going to be in 2021 and beyond. So I'm going to turn back to Dad for just a minute. He had a lot of sayings. Some of them could be a little irreverent. And one of them was, damn it, there's got to be a better way. And it occurred to me as I was talking to a new customer probably about 18 months ago that I got through with my presentation, and he looked at me and he said, so you're telling me good enough is not good enough? And I said, right. And so I showed you a slide earlier with my dad in it, of the range of equipment that we built out for McElroy between 1969 and 1973. Some of those pieces of equipment we still produce today in an evolved form. but I would argue that if you looked at our catalog today versus what it was at that time, you're going to see probably 70% of the product that is there that has been developed within the last 10 to 20 years. And it all comes from this fact that there's got to be a better way. This particular picture was me with a machine that I shepherded into existence along with another great engineer who passed away, a guy named Dave Porter. But Dave and I realized after a couple of trips to one of our good copper mine customers that our customer needed more than just a machine on wheels. They had some really rugged conditions. They had some very extreme situations where they had to fuse pipe. And it wasn't just about fusing the pipe. It was about how did they get to the pipe? How did they put it together? And how did they move to the next joint? And what the result was what we now call the track star. It pretty much remade our industry. It is the gold standard for putting pipe diameters from 8-inch and up together today. And the new product launch that I mentioned that we rolled out in September and October really represents the 4th generation of this and brings some new tools and capabilities to our customer that they've never had before. And so I just kind of plant the seed here that what drives us forward today is still Dad's phenomenal ability to look at what he had just done and still come back and say, you know what, there's got to be a better way. So I'm going to take you through some fairly recent photos because I realize not everybody in your group knows where the products that we build wind up or what they do. Buried infrastructure is a little bit like Rodney Dangerfield. It never gets any respect. And people really don't care about buried infrastructure until it doesn't work. If you've driven around Tulsa anytime in the last handful of years, more than likely you have seen this yellow and green contraption. The green part we make, it's called a line tamer, and it serves the purpose of helping the gas utility decoil, in this case, 4-inch pipe. There's roughly 1,050 feet of pipe on that trailer. And not only decoil it, but take the bend out of it so that it is safer and easier to work with than it would be if you had a crew of men and women trying to basically unroll this unwieldy roll out by hand. ONG is probably one of the cutting edge gas utilities in the nation in terms of how they are upgrading, upsizing, and improving their gas distribution network. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the very energy that we depend on to heat our homes, heat our waters. Some of us cook our food. And if you lived on any of the coasts, you would know that gas was something you didn't used to have. We've always had natural gas in Oklahoma. So we again, it's kind of out of sight and out of mind. The next market that we serve, and I should add before I moved off that slide, gas is really what brought us to this dance. The first applications for high density polyethylene and medium density polyethylene was actually in gas distribution. Energy is the next large sector for us. This is a fairly recent picture from about 2 years ago down in the Midland, Odessa area. It shows our Trackstar 900 fusing 36-inch diameter pipe. That purple stripe on there tells you that it's reclaimed water. A company by the name of Pioneer Resources had a rather ingenious idea about 10 years ago, namely that the idea of this shale revolution and fracking was truly phenomenal, but it was not sustainable based on how much water was consumed for each frack. They went in and made a deal with the city of Midland and then the city of Odessa to actually rebuild their sewage treatment plants at no cost to the municipalities. And in return, they would get the effluent, the treated effluent, the reclaimed water, to be able to use for the fracking purposes. And so over the course of about 3 years, there has been a network of pipelines from 20 to 36 inches in diameter, measuring somewhere around 1,200 lineal miles, whose sole purpose is to gather, transmit, redistribute, basically reclaim water, and then also to move water once it's been fracked off to other areas where those fluid streams can be cleaned and then reused as frack water again. So truly something ecological happening within the oil patch, and we're proud to have been part of it. The next big market that drives our business is mining. Copper mining the world around would not be possible were it not for high density polyethylene pipe. And you say, well, why can that be? Well, the copper that is mined from the earth today is at such low concentrations in the hard rock that the old way of crushing, concentrating, and smelting copper would not be possible. This happens to be our largest machine. We call it the Talon. It is capable of handling up to 2-meter pipe, which is 78.5 inches in diameter. This pipe happens to be 54 inches in diameter and represents a huge job at better managing reclaimed water in what is the highest copper mine in all of the world, which is in Antofagasta, Chile, at about 14,000 feet of elevation. Next, and this gets me back to my water theme. If you ask me, what is our holy grail? Our holy grail is getting a wider adoption of high density polyethylene pipe into cities, municipalities, rural water districts across this land. In the US, we are way behind in this realm. The Europeans have been putting HDPE in the ground for their water and their sewer for probably at least a decade to 2 decades longer than we have. This hero shot here was an early 12-inch ductile iron pipe size polyethylene water main that was done up in North Tulsa, our Trackstar 500. And you know, the city of Tulsa, I'm proud to say, owns a number of our machines. And our goal at the end of the day is to get them to move more aggressively to use polyethylene, because as you'll see in a minute, there's some things that would really help this city move forward in terms of the infrastructure. But at the end of the day, you have to remember, infrastructure, buried infrastructure is Rodney Dangerfield. It never gets any respect. So sewer rehab, this is really where Tulsa cut its teeth on high density polyethylene. This happens to be a job up in one of the northern parts of Tulsa that was actually going in the ground a week ago. If you'll notice, nobody's yard is torn up, yet there's this off-white colored HDPE pipe out in the middle of the street. This pipe was all fused on our equipment, but is being installed in what the industry calls in situ. In other words, it's going inside an existing line. And in this case, they're actually pipe bursting the existing sewer line, pulling this line back in place. What's going to result is a line that is basically exactly where the old line was. So locating it is easy, tying onto it is easy. And going forward, it is a sealed system. So the opportunity for effluent, whether it's gray water or black water, leaving homes in this neighborhood, there's less likelihood of it getting outside the pipeline and contaminating the environment. Plumbing and mechanical. This is another holy grail for us. So everybody understands what plumbing is, hot and cold running water to your sink, to your kitchen, to your bathroom. Mechanical are typically those plumbing applications that move everything from fire sprinkler system water around the building to hot water for heating in the winter and chilled water for cooling in the HVA system throughout the year. We entered this foray with a different thermoplastic pipe material about 10 or 11 years ago. This is called polypropylene random. You can think of this as another thermoplastic pipe that is even more robust in terms of the temperatures and pressures that it can handle. But it's also made in such a way that it is very rigid, and it lends itself to being used indoors. And we're very proud of the fact that we helped a good local mechanical contractor, the pipe manufacturer, and a good channel partner customer of ours install the hot and cold water loops for the HVAC in the new Osage Casino and Hotel north of downtown. And I want to kind of take you down, the last picture I want to add of this trip down memory lane. This is another picture of our Talon. It was taken this last summer near Homer, Alaska. Again, working on 54-inch diameter pipe. And this is what's called a micro hydro project. So back to environmental sustainability, if I could for a moment. Remote villages throughout Alaska have for literally decades relied on diesel generators for supplying their power throughout their settlement. Obviously, it's not sustainable. I've heard stories that they figure a gallon of diesel fuel has a landed cost of somewhere around $50 or $60 based on the fact of how the diesel fuel has to get into some of these remote villages. So what's happened within the last decade are micro hydroelectric projects. And in this case, we happen to be building about a 15,000 lineal foot penstock from a lake at elevation down to a micro hydro plant. It is one of these jobs that they first looked at doing it in ductile iron. They then looked at doing it in steel. Both of those were ruled out because of the corrosive properties and the problems they would have during freezing in the wintertime. Actually, the temperature variation, not just the freezing. They then looked at using PVC, but again decided with the temperature swings that they dealt with, they would never keep a bell and spicketed system together. And ultimately, they chose polyethylene to do the job. But more importantly, they would not have done the job in polyethylene had it not been for our Talon. And the Talon is a very unique piece of equipment that was launched back in 2013. It is a fusion machine that is upside down. And the idea is that as pipe sizes have gotten larger and larger, as wall thicknesses have gotten heavier, it becomes harder and less safe to manipulate pipe overhead and into the machine. Often the machine is damaged. There's certainly always the risk to the operator when you're handling sticks of pipe that could weigh 15 to 20,000 pounds overhead. So this machine is unique in that it straddles the pipeline, and as the name connotes, it is able to grapple the pipe and pull it up into the machine to actually do the fusion weld. So this gives you just a smattering of the opportunities that we have and that we've gone after in our 50 plus years of fusing pipe. So now if I could, and to wrap things up, I'd like to turn to the great freeze of 2021. You can see where a lot of these screenshots came from. It's all been in our recent past that we remember this. But I want to put the perspective on the buried infrastructure and what is at stake. City officials, reported record numbers of breaks, the number of crews that were working overtime, weekend. And at the end of the day, they still were only getting a fraction of those breaks a day. To the city's credit, we've embarked on over a $2 billion effort to improve our streets. And we've had the vision to not only improve the streets, but improve the infrastructure that's beneath the street. But we're still putting infrastructure back under those brand new streets that is the material from the last century. And it may not be in our lifetime, but I guarantee you it will be in our children's lifetime and their children's lifetime that infrastructure that's been put in today with that century-old technology will have this same problem over and over again every time we go through a severe cold snap and every time we go through that summertime heat where the soils dry out and pull the pipe apart. So this just kind of gives you a sense of where the city's been and brings it back into the forefront. The cost of this, think about the cost to make these temporary repairs. Sadly, some of these brand new streets have had to be cut up in order to make these repairs. However, most of the repairs have had taken place on the older streets. Contract crews costs, and you've already heard the mayor and other people within the city talk about the added costs that are going to have to be covered. And what programs are those costs that have to be covered taking away from? We all know about the boil orders that were required in some areas. And again, when I look at this and the ownership cost, if we're spending over $2 billion to redo surface streets, why don't we put the best that we can beneath those streets so that our kids and their kids don't have to deal with it? And so, as we like to say when we're talking to municipal engineers, you need to remember the first law of holes. When you're in one, please stop digging. So let me put some things in perspective. Tulsa and Colorado Springs are two very similar cities in terms of footprint, in terms of temperature, in terms of square miles, and in terms of pipe miles that are in the ground. In full disclosure, Colorado Springs doesn't have as many expansive clays as we have in Oklahoma, but that tempers things only slightly. Tulsa is primarily a ductile iron water pipe customer. We have less than probably 10 projects that have gone in on HDPE. Our water loss on an annual basis is 18%. So think about this. the paychecks that each of you take home, imagine if 18% of that paycheck was gone at the end of each month. That's what we're paying for in the city of Tulsa, is lost water to the tune of about 18%. Colorado Springs, on the other hand, is about 8%. We suffer roughly 1,265 breaks a year versus 70 in Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs has a much more progressive approach to thermoplastic pipe as well as PVC than Tulsa does. That, combined with the fact that they don't have as many expansive clays, explains a lot. And so my plea to each and every one that would hear this message is there are a lot of great reasons to use high density polyethylene. It is proven technology, whether it was handling natural gas or the acids of the mining industry. It may be new to the water industry, but it's not new technology to the industry as a whole. It's a flexible and ductile solution. It handles ground movement from earthquakes, freeze-thaw cycles, expansive clays, and does not pull apart, causing leaks that then have to go be repaired at the worst time of the day or in the worst weather. It has over 100-year life, and it's the only leak-free system that can be installed at this point in time. It has comparable installation costs, yet it always has significant cost savings over the lifetime of its installation. And it also offers the ability to be installed on a trenchless basis, to where you don't have as much surface disruption, torn up neighborhood streets, torn up neighborhood yards, or shut down businesses. So with that said, I would tell you that change is never easy. And again, this was one of those pictures from Alaska. And if you look in the background, you'll see that we have a very special inspector on the site. And as we like to say, you know, the critics of change always tend to be a little bearish, and that's fine. Got to answer those pieces, and we know the inspectors can be the bear. But I can tell you in Alaska, when the job was done, the same bear came back, and he was very happy that the job was done, and was glad that no more of his surroundings had been bothered than had been bothered. But again, we know we're on a journey, and all great journeys start with that first step. The city of Tulsa has taken some of those early steps, and we're looking for ways for them to accelerate that pace so that we have less surface damage and surface rework to do every time we go through one of these freeze thaw or heat shrink cycles that results in water deals. And so, as Hemingway likes to say, it's good to have an end to journey toward, but in the end, it is the journey that matters. And we know that we occupy a very small little corner of this remarkable world and a very customized industry. And we're obviously passionate about what we do. And we think in our own way, we are working to make the world a better place, one project at a time. And again, Matt, thank you for having me. And I'll be happy to take any questions that you all might have.
Thanks, Chip. That was a great presentation. And I have a slew of questions for you. The first one, any downside to HDPE?
You know, what you'll hear is that they're concerned about how it gets repaired. Probably the biggest downside to it is that people aren't familiar with it. Maintenance people aren't familiar with it. And so they ask the question, well, when it's damaged, how do we fix it? And the answer is you're going to fix it the same way you fix the systems that you put in place today. You're going to go in and cut out the damaged section, and you're going to flange a piece in. But at the same time, right now, the way ductile iron and PVC goes in the ground, you have a joint that is guaranteed to leak every 20 feet. We can put in an entire system that only has joints at fire hydrants and valves. And so barring somebody digging into the line and damaging it, that whole run between those valves and such really should never fail. But it's really a familiarity piece.
Great. And this question from Duff Waddell: polyethylene pipe is a derivative of the petrochemical manufacturing industry. What happens if fossil fuel production is severely limited or banned in the future? Is there an alternative feedstock available under the Green New Deal to produce a comparable spec of poly pipe, or do we go back to carbon steel?
Well, sadly, I wish that the average human being had a better appreciation for just how many things that we have in this life that we enjoy that come from the almighty hydrocarbon. PVC pipe, PEX pipe, polyethylene pipe. If you don't have hydrocarbons, you're not going to have those pipe. There's no way to synthesize it any other way. By the same token, if you don't have hydrocarbons, there are a lot of medicinal and pharmaceutical products that would no longer exist. It's just a, I worry that the cachet of Green New Deal and all of that basically obfuscates the larger realities and always fails to ask what the alternative costs are.
This is an interesting question. Is it possible to pull electrical through your piping system that might help bury our utilities that are so susceptible to wind and trees?
Absolutely. And I didn't touch on that, but all of these wind farms that have been built typically have 12 to 16-inch diameter ducts that are made from medium density polyethylene. They call it conduit, but it's still fused together on our equipment because obviously with the wind turbines, you can't have wires in the air lest the rotors cut them up. And if you've looked at some of the buried electrical that has gone on in the city of Tulsa, in my neighborhood of Bullwood, in Maple Ridge, all of that has been done in typically an orange polyethylene. In shorter runs around neighborhoods, that's typically going point to point. There's rarely any joints in the line, but yes, it makes an ideal conduit.
Great. This is more of a comment than a question, but I love the history of it. Our president-elect, Jerry Barrientos, said, "What a great story. Thank you, Chip, for allowing me to intern about 20 years ago." Oh, wow. I, along with Dr., and I'm going to screw this name up, Vozakis, perhaps, from TU, always thought very highly of your family business, having been involved with the Family Owned Business Institute. Thank you for your leadership and impact on our community.
Thank you, Matt.
And I will second that. And I know we're running out of time. There are some other comments and questions on there, and I'd love for you to read over those when you get a chance, but that was a wonderful presentation. I, for one, knew very little of that, and I know a whole lot more about it now. So I appreciate your time very much.
Happy to do it.
Chip, on behalf of everyone here, thank you for taking the time to speak today. Wow, what a presentation. I certainly was aware of your company, McElroy Manufacturing, but really didn't know what was going on behind the walls there to that degree. Hearing about your family-founded company and the success that you are achieving on a worldwide basis, as well as in Tulsa here itself, is remarkable. So congratulations, and thank you again, Chip, for joining us today and speaking to us and letting us know about this wonderful McElroy Manufacturing that's right in our company, right in our area. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You all have a great day and all the best.
Thank you, Chip. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, Monday, March 22nd is World Water Day. Since 2002, the Rotary Club of Tulsa has been dedicated to increasing awareness of the water crisis and raising the necessary funds to bring clean water to those in need who need where it is needed most, and especially after today's presentation for us, water, right? Our club has drilled over 600 water wells, providing clean water to more than 200,000 people in villages throughout Nicaragua. Without water, we're restoring hope and building, with water, I should say, we're restoring hope and building the foundation for a better life for people living in unspeakable and unimaginable poverty. Now, we are going to share a video of our Nicaraguan water well project in celebration of World Water Day. Rotarians, thank you for being part of a life-changing humanitarian project that is making a world of difference. I love those smiling faces of those children. Puts a smile on my face. This World Water Day, we hope you can take action and make a donation to ensure clean water for those who still need our help in the communities in Nicaragua. There'll be a link in the Monday message for online donations. Now it's time for Sarge. Sarge, are you ready?
Oh, President-elect David, holy cow, it's a good, David, did you know today is St. Patrick's Day?
I did.
Oh, good job. Did you have your Lucky Charms with some, maybe some green beer or something this morning for breakfast?
No, I'm still working yet, Carl. Remember.
Oh,
Sarge time.
I didn't realize that PR work was considered actual work,
I don't know
David.
how to get it back to you.
I thought that was playing off.
Right now.
So one thing I'll mention real quick, McElroy's presentation was great. Something a lot of people don't know. I did a study along with the Chamber of Commerce, and Mike Neal is not here to defend himself a few years ago. Every job at McElroy's facility, every single job there generates over 4.5 jobs elsewhere in our city of Tulsa. So it's called the jobs multiplier effect. Manufacturing operations have the greatest job multiplier effect for our economy. We're so grateful to have a company like McElroy here in Tulsa, along with Navistar and other manufacturing interests. But all of that aside, President-elect David, are you feeling lucky? Do you think you can guess where a leprechaun might be? We've got some buckets of gold here, some pots of gold. We're going to play the leprechaun game today. What's your selection for our first leprechaun?
Oh, I'm going to go with pot of gold number 2.
Well, that would be a correct selection. And our Rotary leprechaun at pot of gold number 2 is Cayenne Camus. You know, Cayenne was a Rotary ambassadorial scholar back in, I think, 2010 or 2011, and she's giving us a $100 fine because she studied in, well, not Ireland, but Scotland. It's real close. And she studied in Scotland and stayed with a gentleman named Colin Hunter, who was her host Rotarian. She's giving this $100 because Colin passed in 2020, and she wanted to remember him for her participation in her Rotary development. So Cayenne, thank you for that gift to the Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation. Now, here we got the next one, President David. Do you want to see if you can get lucky and guess another one?
Sarge, let me go at it again. I'm going to, this one's not as easy. Cayenne's picture was in front of that. So I'm going to go with pot of gold number 6.
Well, you're right. In our lucky leprechaun, and I don't know if she's ever been called a leprechaun before or not, but our lucky leprechaun at pot of gold number 6 is Barbara Kogerman. And, Barbara brought us that great speaker a couple of weeks ago on trafficking, and we so appreciate her. But she's given a fine of $83, and she's given that fine, I think, because it's the birthday of her lovely and talented husband, Colonel Bill Kogerman, a former pilot. And I don't know that the 83 means anything, because I can't imagine that Bill is 83 years old. But Barbara, thank you for your participation in our Rotary Club. We appreciate you, and we appreciate Colonel Bill. Let's try again, President-elect David. Let's see if you can pick another lucky pot of gold. What do you got?
Okay, Sarge, I'm going to go with, I'm going to go with the flow, and I'm going to go number 4, pot of gold number 4.
Boy, your luck seems to run with the timing of our slideshow, President-elect David. I don't know, but this is one of my favorite leprechauns, President Paul Baumann. President Paul Baumann contributed a $71 fine because the Baylor Bears won their first basketball title since 1950. So President Paul wanted to recognize that, and I bet Phil Lakin would contribute some fine money to that too if he were here today. But President Paul, he's on spring break. He's chasing the end of the rainbow. Thank you for that fine. Let's see what you got next. What are you going to guess next, David?
Okay, Sarge, I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to take a wild guess at pot number 1.
Pot number 1, pot of gold. Well, that would look like our own Joe Moore. And Joe Moore We certainly appreciate him. And, you know, Joe is a physician who happened to get into the undertaker business. And I always thought that was fascinating about him. He's an interesting guy, but he gave $250 in memory of Dr. Jose Medina, who recently passed. And we appreciate that memory. He was a great member of our club, always participated. When we had those in-person meetings, he was always there, always had a great attitude. We miss him. Joe, thank you for your contribution. And I think we've got, do we have another one, Bree?
Oh, Sarge, I'm going to go on that one. I'll make a number 5, pot of gold number 5.
Oh yeah, there's St. Patrick's favorite little leprechaun. That would be me. So David, I got to tell you real quick, over the weekend, I was driving back, had to run up to Des Moines, Iowa for a funeral on Saturday, coming back on Sunday. On Sunday afternoon, do I look old to you? I don't know. Sunday afternoon, we stopped in Nevada, Missouri to get a Dairy Queen milkshake. I like pineapple milkshake. Stopped in there, walked up to the counter, ordered my pineapple milkshake. The young lady behind the counter said, "Sir, would you like your senior discount?" Now, this generated a conflict for me, David, because I don't like being thought of as a senior. That's the first time that's ever happened, but I do love a good discount. So after I collected myself, I acknowledged her and said, I will take that discount. Now, what's sad about that is that my wife showed up at that counter a few minutes later, having not heard that exchange. She ordered a milkshake. The young lady took her order, sold her the milkshake, said, "Thank you, ma'am." I looked at the young lady and I said, "Why didn't you ask her for a senior discount?" And the young lady said, "Well, sir, she doesn't look nearly as old as you do." Now, it's not common to tip at a Dairy Queen, but my wife tipped that young lady at the counter. But I gave $100 because my name was in the paper. Sometime last week, I'm helping a client with a retail development in Collinsville at Highway 20 and Highway 75. So there's a little money for the Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation from me. And do we have anything else? Oh, there he is. There's the leprechaun. Finally, at the end, there's the leprechaun. David, you got it through the process of elimination. Good job. I will say we do have 2 mystery fines that total $50. Someone gave a fine for a birthday for $25, and then someone else contributed $25 just in recognition of everything that Tim and Barbara Nall do for our club and our community. We're grateful for Tim and Barbara and what they do for the club. We're thankful for this contribution. And I think that's all we've got today, David. This particular game was my associate Bree Segovia's idea. She did a great job with it. Thank you, Bree.
Well, thank you, Sarge, and thank you, Bree. I love the clever game today. That just made it really, really special. And the whole focus of it on St. Patrick's Day, obviously, but made it extra special. So special thanks now to this week's sponsors: Vision Source Tulsa, Terry Lawson; Region Bank, Elaine Dishman and Greg Boudreau; Claude Neon Federal with James Adair; John Croissant Allstate Agency, John Croissant. We'll forego the breakout rooms for today, but I urge you in the future to take advantage of them. It's a great way to meet your fellow Rotarians. And thank you so much for joining our meeting today. We are adjourned.